This episode of Around the Layout is brought to you by Rapido Trains.
Buying Rapido trains will make you happy.
Haven't you heard? Rapido Trains has announced a U-boat load of General Electric U-Series locomotives, U-25Bs, U-30CGs, U-33Cs, and U-36Cs, and the U-34CH. You can check out all of these new releases and much more on their website, rapidotrains.com. Did the snow keep you from getting to the Railroad Hobby Show? No worries. Spring Creek Model Trains has you covered. Right now, ATLP listeners can take 5% off in-stock, regularly priced Rapido Trains products on their website through May 31st. Use code ATLPSPRING26 at checkout at springcreekmodeltrains.com. Serious about your model trains? Protect and organize your prize collection with ModelTrainBox.com. Premium CNC cut foam storage boxes and transport cases for both HO and N scales, designed by modelers for modelers, with free U.S. shipping on every order. Durable, stackable, and built to last. Visit ModelTrainBox.com and give your fleet the home it deserves. ATLP Extra is our monthly newsletter delivered right to your inbox each month. Sign up for free at atlpextra.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott, so glad you could join us. On this episode, we're going to explore the world of 1/220th scale. That's a Z scale. And joining me to do that is Tim Mills. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Ray. Appreciate you letting me be on here.
Glad to have you here and excited to get a big education on the small scale of Z. Maybe not so well covered scale, so we're going to give it the credit it's due. Looking forward to diving in. But before we do that, why don't you give folks a little bit of introduction to what it is that you do in the hobby?
Thanks, Ray. So I am the owner of US Z Scale. I am an authorized dealer for American Z Line. I'm the only dealer in Pennsylvania, so one option to choose from if you like the Keystone State. I purchased this business on March 17th of 2025 from John Cubbin, and some of you may be familiar with him. He actually runs the channel Rail Dig on YouTube, and he's into a lot of the creative sides. So definitely check him out, like and subscribe. You'll learn a lot about scenery and wiring and lighting and all those things. He gave me a pretty good template business that already had 700 plus customers, and I just had to take it and run with it. And it was something I wanted to do. I kind of wanted to start from scratch years down the line. Figured maybe it's more of like a fun business, but when this opportunity came by, of course, my boss at home was a little bit skeptical, my wife, but she was cool with it after a while, and now she's grateful that I'm doing this as well. So it's not about breaking the bank; it's about expanding the hobby, and it's my hobby too. So obviously, I want my customers to have a good experience with Z Scale as well.
So from being in the hobby to owning a hobby business, how's that affected your modeling?
So it's honestly, it's given me an opportunity to do more and multiple things at once. So I am working on railroad projects. I have plenty of micro layouts I've been working on. Just finished the one up with my 4-year-old daughter. I'm working on a 2x16 foot Z scale layout in my basement right now, just to display that full AZL power. And I want to be able to run longer trains and really show everybody what it's about. So my modeling has definitely gone up since I bought this business, and it's given me an opportunity to share it with everybody.
And what was your background in Z scale prior to purchasing US Z scale?
I didn't even know Z scale existed until a few years ago. And they've been around since 1972 when Markland came out with them to compete with N scale, I believe, when they came out with the Mini Club in 1972. And when I was growing up, I was honestly just an HO guy. I thought N was too small. I thought O and G was out of the question because it was expensive. So I thought HO, your traditional 4x8 was the best I could ever do. And for me, after I got married, had kids, bought a house, and got back into trains, it was like, wow, I don't have a lot of space. So then I started exploring N scale. And for me, Z scale really came to light in 2023 for me when I had started following Steve's trains on YouTube in 2021 when I really got back into trains. And that's when I saw N Scale close and personal. And I was like, I want to get into that. So I started diving full force into N Scale. And then when he got his first Z Scale layout in 2023 and Steve built a layout on it, I was like, that's what I want to do. It's just everything about that just reached out and grabbed me. Like, and I was hooked on just the whole Z world, the background, American Z line. And it's just been a blast ever since.
So this has been a pretty rapid succession in Z Scale for you from 2023 discovering it, and now 2025 you purchase US Z Scale. Now about a year into that business, things have happened pretty quickly for you.
Sure have.
So let's talk a little bit about some Z Scale basics and seemingly what you've started to learn. And of course, the beauty of the internet, you mentioned Steve's Trains YouTube channel, and a lot of folks now being influenced by things they're seeing on social media and especially on YouTube. But tell us some of the Z Scale basics.
So first and foremost, I mean, the old phrase, I don't have a room for a train layout, is just out the window with Z Scale. I mean, you don't need space. You can build a tiny layout that can sit on a shelf, sit on a desk, sit on an end table. You can make them battery powered. So it's really, you get the full effect in just a small amount of space. You can do all the scenery you can with any other scale, whether it's terrain, buildings, there's tons of lines of buildings. But I would say getting started, American Z-Line doesn't do like specific starter sets like you would see in a Bachmann or a Kato set with the track and everything, but we do piece them together. To start out with the Rokuhan track, that's the best bet for Z-Scale. Rokuhan's like the Kato Unitrack of Z-Scale. And they make the RO28 starter pack, which is just a simple oval. And you can put that on like an 18 by 24 base to make a tiny little layout of, and it can fit pretty much anywhere. So between that and Rokuhan controllers and maybe one locomotive and 3 pieces of rolling stock, you're good to go. I mean, it really doesn't take much. Even if you don't do much with trains and you wanted one of these just as a decoration, I mean, they're great for. We have little micro layouts in all different seasons that we actually rotate up and out of our living room, depending on the season, just to have on display.
I'm an HO scale guy, and I know you said that you were into HO scale prior to all of this. Are you still modeling HO?
I'm modeling in everything, Ray. Honestly, I want to have one good project in every single scale, and that includes S scale and G and even T gauge I've looked at, real tiny. I'm currently working on an HO project. I have it's a 42 by 42 inch with a 36-inch circle on it. And it's going to be a 4 seasons layout, just something I came up with that I wanted to do. And I wanted to have at least one place to run HO trains continuously.
So going into it as an HO, and of course you got all these other scales, but I'm an HO guy. Going into Z scale, let's talk about some of the comparisons. Obviously, size is obviously a difference between all the scales, of course. But let's talk about some of the differences otherwise, what to expect from Z scale versus HO or maybe N or others.
Well, the size for sure scares a lot of people away. I think they get intimidated by that because they don't want to work on anything small. But I think with American Z-Line and what they're doing, I mean, really all you're getting is a smaller train. You're getting all the features that HO would do or N would do because their detail is just impeccable on what they do. I mean, they're doing things that no one thought could be done in Z scale, whether it's spine cars or going back to brass. And they really care. They really care about the attention to detail. So I really don't think there's much difference other than size.
Are you seeing in the Z scale world where people are able to apply what they have or what they've been doing to HO to Z, or are there some sacrifices that need to be made? Like that's just not possible in Z scale. Is there any of that?
Nothing that I have really seen. I mean, I don't think there's as much of a steam selection when it comes to Z scale. I mean, AZL did the Mikados years ago. Rokuhan actually came out with their first steam engine for the U.S. market. They came out with a Baltimore and Ohio 060 in 2024, I believe. recently AZL just released the J-Class Norfolk and Westerns in brass. That's the first brass locomotive made in a lot of years by them. It doesn't seem like anybody in Z is doing a lot of the American steam engines like you would see with Athearn or Atlas or even like Bachmann or whatever. So that might be the only thing. And one thing I've noticed, like with Z, I don't think anything you could buy fresh out of the box comes with DCC and sound. And I know some guys are crazy about that. Now, AZL's locomotives do come DCC ready, but that would be a project you have to do, including a soundboard and everything.
So what does it take to put DCC into a Z-scale locomotive?
So with these, just like with Atlas locomotives, I've seen GP40s, another Steve Strange video, where he just pulls the shell off and swaps the board, and that's it. And ours are pretty similar depending on what features you want and depending on the locomotive, because some of the locomotives actually have screw-in PCB boards like the RS3s that we do. Other ones, it's just in and out.
Now, we talk about DCC, but I don't think we're talking about sound, right? Because is sound available in Z-scale?
I believe there are people out there that have done it, and I haven't personally done it, but I know that if you want it in there that bad, I think they do make sound chips for these. That's, like I said, I'm not as big of a DCC guy in general, so for me, like, it doesn't even occur to me to do that with Z-scale just because it's already so small.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, technology is shrinking for sure. I mean, the ability to put large amount of things in a small space in 2026 is certainly possible, but still mind-blowing that they're able to get sound into a Z-scale locomotive.
Yeah, yep.
Let's revisit getting started in Z-scale. You talked about not having per se a beginner set, but there's options out there. Talk about more specifically where you would aim somebody who reaches out to US Z-scale and says, hey, I want to get started with Z-scale. What should I be doing? What kind of recommendations do you give them?
Well, one thing, like, you can get a starter set that's pieced together from Z-Track Distribution. Rob Clues has those. That's how I got started. I bought my first one off of him, which came with a Conrail GP30, 3 pieces of rolling stock, the Rokuhan R028 that I mentioned, and also the Rokuhan RCO2 controller. So usually, like, if I have a customer who's new, and it seems like I have a lot of them that are getting into it for the first time, which I love that, because like then they actually have a point of contact, somebody that can help them with it. But I would more so see what are they looking to do with it before anything else. Are you like, do you want to put a giant Z-scale layout out there on a 4x8 like you would an HO? Or do you want to build a micro layout? Or you want to go like middle of the road? I think 2x4 is a good size to do for that. If you don't want something like too huge, but you want something that's at least functional. So that would be the first start. And obviously, if they want to go small, I'm always going to recommend the RCO2 controller and the Rokuhan R028 track pack, because that's your best way to get started in that. Now, as far as locomotives and rolling stock, we're on our 3rd rerun of the GP30 diesels. I mean, that was my first Z-scale locomotive. They're great beginner ones. They go around any loop of track. There's nothing too small for them as far as what Rokuhan makes. And then it's just picking out rolling stock. I mean, whether you want to, my first starter set came with a 60-foot Greenville boxcar and a tanker car. So you get a little bit of a mix of everything in that.
So let's dive into track a little bit, because obviously one of the foundations of building any layout, and including Z-scale. Let's talk about what track is available.
So your number one thing is Rokuhan. If you guys are in HO and N-scale and you use Kato unit track, just imagine Kato unit track made Z-scale track, and that's what you would get with Rokuhan. The options are incredible as far as turnouts, multiple size straight track pieces, different radius curves, double crossovers, single crossovers, you name it. They pretty much have everything. Actually, single crossover, let me back up there. I think they don't have the one piece, but you can make one with 2 turnouts real easy. But they're the best of the best, I think, when it comes to it. Other than that, Microtrains track, they made track at one point, and I've heard that was the best. I actually had a customer send me 3 loops of it, which probably the equivalent of the Rokuhan R028 as far as size goes. and we used one for my latest project. We're going to use one for another, and then the third one actually doesn't have the roadbed on it, which I have plans for that. But the only thing that I think is better about micro trains is the tie spacing looks a lot more realistic than the Rokuhan. And I know some people get hung up on that, but micro trains just didn't have the options. They didn't have nearly as many options as Rokuhan does. And nowadays, you can't even get it, eBay or wherever you might find it, but it's very limited. And then other than that, just Markland track without the roadbed. I know Atlas does some Z track. I've heard their Flex track is really good. Personally, I like the roadbed. I've put cork roadbed down with HO scale, and that's a pain. So I don't want to do it in Z. So that's why we stick with Rokuhan.
But it is available. So there actually is a track only option. You can put your own roadbed down, or you can use Rokuhan, which provides, like you said, just like the Kato track, that you'd be able to clip it together. And I'm going through your website here, uszscale.com, and there is a lot of options here for track.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, for something that small, and the same options you get with HO or N as far as like Kato unit track goes, or some of the others.
Now, how does it convert? Like, I know, 18 inches really tight in HO, 22 starting to get there, and you want some nice sweeping curves. How does that translate down to Z scale?
All AZL locomotives, maybe not including the J class, Norfolk and Westerns, are designed to go around the 195 curves. I think that's the R004 in Rokuhan, I believe. And so really there's no limit. I mean, if you want to do wider curves, if you want to do like a double loop, like an inside and outside track, then you would go with like 195s and then 220s. The layout I'm building has 4 loops. So it goes all the way from 195 to 220 to 245 to 270s. So, and those 270s for sure for the J class, and the upcoming release of the Union Pacific Big Boy that we're doing in Z scale next year will need those wider turns.
Okay, so I'm seeing it on here that it says like R120, R490, R145. Those are all relative to the degrees of the curve. That correct?
Yeah, like the R490s, that's more like something that you want to put on a turnout, like on the spur, so it makes the tracks parallel. One of those just gradual curves.
And is there different gauges, or is it now? I mean, we're getting so small. I mean, do they even have different gauge rail, or is it all pretty much the same?
Rokuhan's pretty much all the same. It's all Z scale.
Okay, and now let's talk about powering up that track. Now, we talked about options of DC and DCC. Talk about that a little bit more.
So, you guys that are in DCC, you know about obviously all the options that you have for that. DCEX, DCCEX, I think it's called, NC power cabs, Digitracks, all those things. So I don't know like which ones would be compatible. I think that depends on which decoder you put into that. Again, DCC is not really my thing, but Rokuhan controllers are fine. I mean, they're really all you need. The RCO3 is probably my biggest recommendation if you are going to do a little bit bigger of a layout and involve turnouts, because it does come with 2 built-in turnout switches. They have the same switch capability like Kato does with their controllers, where you just clip the thing on the side. You can still do that if you want to add more turnouts. With the RCO2, which is a smaller controller, that one doesn't have any built-in turnouts. You can still add them if you want to. But that's probably the most basic one. They're pretty inexpensive. They're battery powered, or you can plug them into the wall with an AC adapter. That's really all you need if you're just doing a single loop with no turnouts.
Excellent. So a couple different controller options here I'm seeing on your website. Turnout switches, even the turnouts can be powered in Z scale, huh?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You can do. I have one of my layouts that I built at the end of the summer. I built like a fall themed layout, and I wired 2 turnouts into it, even if it's it's only 20 by 28 inches. And it's like you could easily just put your finger on there and flip the switch. But I had to wire it because just one of those things,
So let's talk about locomotives, rolling stock. Now we got all the track. We're talking about powering it. In our world of HO, we've got a plethora of different manufacturers making locomotives. What's that world look like in Z scale?
American Z Line's leading the way. There's no competition when it comes to them. I mean, we've had micro trains, which has been great. Like they've done Z scale, and now with their purchase by Atlas and everything, I think everybody's anticipating what that means for every scale that they deal with. Barkland's still doing their thing, but they're like, they're the original, so you got to give them respect. But they're kind of a different breed with even the couplers that they do and how they make. And then you have some other ones. You have like Full Throttle, which is just a one-man show out of Florida, and he makes some amazing rolling stock. That's all he does is Z-scale freight rolling stock. And I know he goes through Bowser to make his. And then Atlas has kind of made a comeback in Z. But really the best option, it all goes back to AZL. With new releases on the 1st and 15th of every month, you're always getting something. You're gaining something for every road name. Like, no matter what part of the country you're in, everybody's got their specific road names. Like, one likes this more than another. You name it, we probably have it. And that's probably the way to go. And these locomotives will last forever. I mean, they run great. And the biggest thing is just keep the track clean. Other than that, they're built to last.
I can say one thing, browsing your website, I was really impressed by the selection of locomotives that are available and covering a wide variety of eras too. It was pretty impressive.
Yeah, even since I've gotten into this, I've really learned a lot. And being from Pennsylvania, just north of Pittsburgh, like obviously the PRR is a big thing. Everybody who knows nothing about trains knows about the Pennsylvania Railroad. But seeing some of these other ones with AZL doing the releases, I've learned a lot. Like even when we came out with the RS3s in Spokane, Portland, and Seattle, I never heard of that railroad. And then doing my research, it was like, well, that was one of the ones that went into Burlington Northern and then became BNSF. And there's this whole chain of company after company merging. And it's like you kind of get to really see those ones in the other parts of the country.
I'm just wildly impressed. The amount of road names that are covered, obviously the model of locomotives that are available. It's not just, it doesn't pigeonhole you by any extreme. There's a pretty wide path here for Z-scale.
Yeah. Well, that's the cool thing about like some of these merged railroads, like Conrail. I mean, the amount of railroads that you have that go into that, and we have rolling stock in it all might not be available right now, but over time AZL has definitely done rolling stock in those predecessor railroads at Conrail. So, and even you look at like Burlington Northern, well, you had 4 railroads go into one with that. So you can model, you can combine everything that we have for that. Great Northern, SP&S, CB&Q, and Northern Pacific. I mean, so there's really something that you can do with this in every part of the country and connect it somehow, even if there's not a lot of options available for certain rolling stocks. You can sure make a decently long train with what we have.
And just a moment ago, you hinted on rolling stock. Let's dive a little deeper into that. You mentioned AZL and then Full Throttle. Talk a little bit more about rolling stock availability in both freight and passenger.
Yeah, so I actually did a comparison video a couple years ago on my YouTube channel between Full Throttle micro trains and AZL freight cars. They all have their different quirks about them, different things that make them stand out, and they're all compatible as far as couplers go and everything. You can run trains worth all of them, and Atlas too. So it really all just depends what you want to do. I mean, it's like, my railroad, my rules kind of thing. So what do you want to model in, whether it be a specific road name or a specific type of car? I think with Full Throttle especially, he's got some crazy road names that he's come out with, and he gives you a little history on it. Like there's ones they're like Woodside reefers that he has, and they're labeled as Clico Club Ginger Ale. And he gives you the history on it, where it was an old company that was eventually bought by Cott Beverage, but they owned 1/3 of a mile of track, and they operated these boxcars on it, shipping ginger ale and other pop products and things like that. So you could have anything from that to like mainline BNSF reefers or things like that. It's just, there's so many different time zones and everything, or eras, where you could model in.
And then not only you talked about freight and passenger, and then military trains I see here on the website.
Yeah, that's Z Panzer, who's out of the UK, who does all the military vehicles and rolling stock to go with it.
Wow, amazing stuff available. So now that we got some track, we've got some locomotives, we're talking about rolling stock. And again, I invite everybody to go to your website, uszscale.com, and we'll share that link in our show notes, aroundthelayout.com/216. Now we get this on a layout. Well, let's talk about a layout, and let's talk about some of the things that you have seen done in size wise. You recommended a 2 foot by 4 foot layout to get started. Talk about some other options that are available for Z-scalers to get some track laid down and get some trains running.
So, as I said before about the RO28 pack, that's probably your best way to start. Get the RO28, whether you glue it down on a layout or not, at least get familiar with it. If you've never done anything in Z-scale, I mean, put it on your dining room table, kitchen table, whatever, just a flat surface. You can put it on a desk and figure out what you like about it, what you want to do with it, and then kind of go from there. Really get used to that size. As far as moving up from there, we have the RO80 Rokuhan set, which is their switching yard, and that will fit in a 2x4 space. And you can obviously expand on that with more Rokuhan track. This one has like a double slip turnout in it, 2 sidings, so you could stage trains while you run another. And then that's a pretty good base to build off of getting started. So, and then, because I think one thing about the micro layouts you do find, and I have definitely found this, because that's really all I ever built until I started this big project, is once you get a lot of rolling stock and you get a lot of cars, well, that micro layout seems pretty small even for Z-scale when the train's chasing its tail, basically. So, you expand on it. Watch what these trains can do. I mean, even if you double, triple header a locomotives together, I have 3 Canadian Nationals attached to 12 Ortner cars right now on my big layout, just to show how much they can run. So start small and move up.
Has there been a modular approach taken yet to Z-scale? I mean, we see it with T-Track, with N-scale, and we've seen it with HO scale. I can imagine how much fun it would be to connect these Z-scale layouts together. And it seems like maybe with this Rokuhan track that might be a possibility. Have we seen that yet in Z-scale?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, first and foremost, Rob Clues at Z-Track Distribution. I mean, he's got his T-Track layout that he does all the videos for AZL on. He continually builds modules and landscapes them and does videos on those. And what's nice about the T-Track module thing, I think, is like you don't have to do it all at once. If you want to have basically a blank slate and you pull a module off there to work on it at once, and even if you put another blank module in to replace it while you're working on the one, you can still run your trains and then do your scenery all at once for one module and then move to the next one. I mean, the only thing, which it's not really a big deal, but you have to, just as long as you want to blend your scenery right from module to module. But they're definitely up and coming with those. I think a lot of people are doing them. Klondike modules is one that I recently connected with. I actually have some stuff from him coming in the mail, so definitely check them out. He does Z and N modules. And I'm actually planning, if I can, maybe for the start of next school year, I'm looking at the possibility of doing an after-school program for high school kids to be able to have a model train club, build their own T-Track Z module, and then we all put them together and put them on display, something like that. So yeah, I've never personally done modules, but from everything I've seen about them, there's so many benefits to that.
And see, I'm learning something tonight because I have Klondike N-scale T-Track modules. I had no idea that there was a Z-scale version of it available. So I'm learning something, and I'll definitely share a link to Klondike's website again in our show notes around the layout.com/216.
Yeah, definitely. I heard about him through Jimmy from the DIY and Digital Railroad, who's also a big influence of mine and who I've kind of nudged into Z-scale a little bit as he builds his MRR3 layout. But he has put Klondike modules on display with his N-scale module layout, and that's how I stumbled across that he did Z. And I'm like, well, this is something I need now. So we're definitely going to support that.
Well, Z-scale modules seem to be, to me, a great idea because it's something you could put together at home in a relatively small space, use it independently, but then that ability to pick it up and then join others and put multitudes of modules together and have some, in Z-scale, you can do a lot of big running. I can imagine just what that would look like. That'd be incredible.
Yeah, and I think with modules, the one thing, especially, you don't have a lot of bench work with those. You really don't have any bench work. I mean, you can go to Home Depot and buy, or Sam's Club and buy a 6-foot folding table, and there's your base for your layout with modules. And in Z scale, I mean, even if they overhang a little bit, I mean, it's not the end of the world. But you find having a place to put them. There you go. I mean, what more could you ask for instead of building up the base to it like we all have in HO or N or something bigger?
So let's talk about putting some scenery on these Z scale, either modules or layouts that we're building and putting. We got the track down. Let's talk about buildings and all the other scenery materials. What's available in Z scale?
So, well, first off, for scenery, woodland scenics over everything else. I mean, I think no matter what scale you're in, and if you're doing scenery, you're using woodland scenics, and all for the right reasons because they make the best stuff, I think. I personally, I like to start because most of my layouts, I don't just build right on wood. I use foam. I'll use, I mostly use 2-inch foam board. So so I have some depth if I want to carve out a river or something like that. But I start with earth undercoat by Woodland Scenics to paint. I feel like it gives you good base, and then if your scenery gets botched up, it's not just showing the Pink Panther underneath on the foam boards. You're just seeing like the ground, ground color. It just depends on what season you want to do. I like the blended turf in multiple different shades. For my fall layout, I just use one of them. It was like the more darker one, like faded grass. Their clump foliage, which is another thing, and I learned this from Steve's trains, and when he got his Z scale layout. But clump foliage works great for trees in Z scale because we would use it for like brush or something in HO or N. But if you want to do like a covered hill in clump foliage, it looks just like a forest because of the size of the trains and the track and everything. So you can kind of cut the corner on that a little bit. You don't need to go with like real trees or super trees, whatever we use for like bigger scales. And then whether you want to use like epoxy and resin or you want to use Woodland Scenics water, the fake water stuff, you can do that for water features as well with a little bit of paint. And that's pretty much the basics of it if you want just for scenery alone.
Let's talk about buildings, because one thing that we want to do, a railroad services buildings, it goes through towns. We got to have our buildings. Talk about what's available out there in the market.
Absolutely. Arca Stories, first and foremost. They make some great buildings. And if you can see on my site, there's anything from houses, turn of the century houses, little garages. There's old like country churches. There's the grain elevator that came out in 2024. We have like the railway works depot station, pretty much anything, signal towers. The grain elevator was one thing I put on my fall layout, and it was really a nice addition to it. They make some great stuff. It's all like real hard cardboard. It's very tedious to put it together, but it's really worth it to put those structures on. Anybody can 3D print something, but when you look at a kit like that you actually have to build, and the detail's already there, you just got to put it together.
Well, that's pretty amazing. It's amazing. I'm looking again at your website, uszscale.com, and yeah, there's a lot of options here for buildings. I'm really surprised about that.
Yeah, and Arca Stories continues to come out with things. I mean, those water towers on there, those are probably the newest that I have up. We're doing a coaling tower that was the Pennsylvania Railroad used. There's actually still one standing in like the next county over in Armstrong County, kind of close to me, right along the Allegheny River. That's still there, and we're doing those as Arca Stories is doing those as well. So they really have an addition to any layout, no matter what you're modeling in. Even if it's not the era, like these turn of the century houses, well, you could paint it, you could make it look a little newer, or you could make it look older and make it look like it's something stuck in time on your layout.
I see that Rokuhan also offers bridges, and then I scroll down and I see rail dig, and I see concrete abutments are available.
Yeah, so Rail Dig, and again, this was John Cubbin, the former owner of USC. He's still doing his Rail Dig stuff. We don't have a lot of it. He's exclusively going through Z-Scale Monster nowadays. with any of his new products. And he also has another line called Z Trains of different electrical equipment for layouts. But like this Catfish Creek bridge model that he has, you can see just for like the little picture of the diorama how good that looks in there. And that'd be a real easy one to attach to install in any layout, especially if it's done with foam board where you can just carve it out and let that little bridge sit in there.
Yeah, it's a beautiful scene. It's done very well and very cool. So a lot of that stuff available. And I guess that's my surprise. I figured that if you go to Z scale, you'd have to make a whole lot of sacrifices. But what I'm learning tonight seems like there's not a whole ton of sacrifice. It's not like you're losing a whole lot as far as availability and capabilities of things that can be done.
Yeah, and like I said, with AZL, I mean, they're breaking boundaries as far as Z scale goes. They're doing these things, like I mentioned, the spine cars that people thought could never be done in Z scale. We have on the AZL archive website, there actually is a page of upcoming releases that will be out, and they give you the dates on them. We're going to be doing like the Alco FA1 and the FB1. There's a brass passenger set coming out for the J classes this summer. We're doing the U25Bs at the end of the year. Just lots of different things. More freight, more cabooses. Going to be doing the big boy next year. So, the one thing I always try to point out to people when it comes to AZL is the two owners. They care. Hans Ritterwold and Robert L. Brighton. They really care about what they do. And the main thing I always bring up when I tell people what kind of company you're dealing with is when we came out with the air slide hoppers in 2024, Robert L. Brighton didn't like the way they swayed on the track. He thought it wasn't realistic enough. So he came up with these no sway pins where you pop one of the bolsters out of one of the trucks and put one of these pins in, and it keeps the car from swaying. Just something so simple like that. But that's the attention to detail that you get with AZL. And I don't think a lot of people are really looking at it like that when it comes to any model railroad company. But, the owners really care about their products and they want them to be right.
Let's talk about the community surrounding Z-Scale. I mean, we know there's a lot of folks into HO and N. What's the Z-Scale community look like?
So it's surprisingly all ages. You would think it would be more of a young man's game just because how small it is. I mean, I have some older friends in model railroading and they won't even touch Z-Scale because they're like, my eyes aren't good enough for that anymore. But it's definitely all ages. And we have the AZL forum where all of us go to connect. We communicate directly with the owners on there. They take feedback from their customers. And there's a lot, there's posts in there every day. I mean, several times a day, just over different topics. And it's a big following. I mean, and for those, unlike me, since I kind of came into this way late in the game, I mean, but for people that grew up with Markland, and then when Microtrain started doing it in the 80s with Z-Scale, like AZL is definitely a breath of fresh air to them, seeing all the new stuff that they come out with and all the things that they do, road names and different rolling stock and all that. So, but it's a big following, and I don't think people realize it as much unless you're in this scale.
For the person listening to our podcast now that's either an HO scale modeler or an N scale modeler, O scale, or any of the others, and I know you mentioned that you model in a whole bunch of scales, what can they get out of Z-Scale if they were to start with a little bit of Z-Scale and start to get into that scale a bit?
It teaches you patience, that's for sure, working with something that small. I've always said Z-Scale's for either the single guy in an efficiency apartment who doesn't have a lot of space for a railroad but really wants one, or it's the guy who's going through a midlife crisis and his wife doesn't want to let him have a railroad because she thinks there's not enough space. So that being said, you can definitely get a lot out of it. It is a lot of fun. It's neat. I'm still amazed, even when I look at these micro layouts and see how something that small can run. And it's nice that you can do a quick build in one of these things. It doesn't have to be a project that takes years. I mean, we know from, Ray, you and I, HO guys for a long time, we know how long it can take with working on an HO layout. It can take years. It can take decades. because you're always changing something. You're always doing this, that, and the other. With here, you can do a start to finish build in a day. Your biggest thing you're waiting on is just stuff to dry. So if you want to do a quick build, quick project, it's very easy to make it happen. And then you can move on to something else, whether it's more modeling or, say you don't have a lot of time to put into the hobby. Well, here you go. You can have something up and running and ready to go in a day.
I could definitely see it as something that helps hold you over until you have your scale of choice, when you're ready to build your scale of choice, or in between layouts or whatnot. It would give you that. It would keep you in the hobby, keep you involved, but in a much more compact way.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's, in some ways it's almost a nice breather from working on a big project. Because if you're doing the full spread in an N scale or an HO layout with wiring, sound, DCC, everything, lights, scenery, the whole 9 yards, and you want to break from that, well, you can take a pause, build a little micro Z layout, have that running on the bench while you're building your bigger layout, just so you can have trains running while you're working.
Yeah, or have it in a novelty type place like an office or a man cave or a she shed, or I don't want to leave anybody out, right? It could be pretty much anywhere, right? And fit in and still have the ability to share trains with others.
Yeah. Well, and like I have a Roku Hunt starter set that I bought. It's the Kia 52. It's just one powered passenger car, like the equivalent of a Bud RDC. And I have it on like a very tiny loop of track. I actually carry it in my work bag with a controller. So if I want to show somebody Z scale, that's what I show them. And this loop of track is almost so small it could fit on a dinner plate. So for people to actually get to see something up close and personal, that it's like, wow, yeah, I could pretty much put this on anything.
It's got me thinking maybe that's how I hold myself over with all these hotel stays on business travel. Just throw a couple Z-scale cars in a bag with a locomotive and some track, and I could keep myself entertained on those hotel nights instead of sitting there watching the TV.
There you go. You can promote USZ while you're at it as well.
There you go. Awesome stuff. So glad to get a little bit of education on Z-scale and the interesting world of 1/220th scale. And I certainly learned a lot. I think it demystified it a bit for me as far as what's available. And I'm just wildly impressed. And I think that others that go to uszscale.com and check out the website and see all the stuff that's available, I think you're going to be very impressed too. You can find all those links on our website, aroundthelayout.com/216. And now it's time to hear the answers for this month's question of the month. That's where you can hear yourself on Around the Layout podcast. This month's question of the month is, why did you choose the scale U model? And we got over a dozen responses to our question of the month. We boiled it down to 8. And our first answer comes from Bob Ginger.
Hi, all. My name is Bob Ginger, and I'm from Phoenix, Arizona. When I was 9 years old, I found an N-scale train set under the Christmas tree. It was a small oval track, and I immediately fell in love with it. One of my sisters was born prematurely 3 days later. Us kids spent time with different neighbors for a few days while Dad was at the hospital with my mom and the baby. My new N-scale layout and its cool box went with me everywhere I went those few days. We were inseparable, so I was hooked on N-scale.
Yeah, Tim, sometimes the influence of a scale can happen right from the beginning, can it?
Absolutely. I mean, whether it's a scale or a road name or something significant, I mean, even for me with Z-scale, the first thing I bought was the Conrail starter set with the little GP30 here, because that's what my grandfather, when he retired from the railroad in 1978, he was working for Conrail. And the day he retired, he actually rolled a couple engines down the hill into the Allegheny River because he went over a bad switch. So for me, some of those things, that we have in our personal lives that we can relate to model railroading, we carry them a long time.
That's for sure. Well, let's hear from Austin.
Hello, folks. I'm Austin from Northwest Arkansas. I'm a longtime listener, but first-time caller. I model an HO scale, but specifically HO in 30. As to why HO or HO in 30? Well, I'm a fairly recent returner to the hobby, But when I was a kid, we had an HO scale layout and we played on that thing and had a blast. So I guess HO is just really what I'm used to. After 20 some odd years of being out of the hobby, I'm back and messing around with this HO and 30 stuff because one, I thought I could save some money by being able to reuse some of that stuff from the childhood layout, like buildings and structures and whatnot. But also I thought I could do a little more in the space I have currently as compared to standard HO. However, I've learned that HO and 30 has a lot more scratch building and kit bashing involved than I first realized. But I'm finding that I really, really enjoy that part of the hobby. I want to do standard HO again someday, but for now, I'll keep working on this narrow gauge stuff to build up my skills and figure out what I want to focus on and model in the future. Anyways, thank you, Ray, and everyone involved with making this podcast happen. Have a great day and happy Valentine's Day.
Well, thank you, Austin, and welcome back to the hobby. And yeah, that's a unique scale. And sometimes scales do have a little bit of trade-off. You know, you save space, but then you have to scratch build or availability isn't as much. There's always a give and take, isn't there?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of narrow gauge stuff. I've never really dabbled in it, but I've always the layouts I've seen, especially ON30, seeing like the narrow O gauge and how much stuff you can get in a small amount of space, which I'm used to with Z scale anyway. But seeing those narrow gauge scales, I have a deep appreciation for those, especially old steam engines. There was a lot of old logging railroads in this country that were ran narrow gauge, old Shays, Climaxes, Heisler locomotives. Yeah, you can do a lot. And the kit bashing, I think when that makes it all the more fun when you actually put something together out of nothing or just taking something and modifying it to fit your needs on the layout. I think that's great to have those original things and ideas like that.
Let's head to Poughkeepsie for our next answer.
Hi, Ray. This is Brian Murata from Poughkeepsie, New York, and my modeling scale of choice is N scale. Becoming an N scaler had more to do with happenstance. When I was 8, my mother and I moved across the country, and she promised me that she'd get me a train set once we were settled. As because of this move, I had to sacrifice regular access to a 4x8 HO layout at one of my grandparents' house, along with the American Flyer layout that one of my uncles had in his basement. There were no hobby shops in our new town, but there was a KB toy store in the mall, and they had basic Bachmann train sets. Since we were living in a small apartment at the time, she asked me if we could get the N-scale set, since it wouldn't take up too much space. I didn't really have a strong preference. I was just happy to be acquiring a new train set. That Christmas, my father bought me some lengths of Atlas Flex Track, a couple of Atlas RS3s, and a handful of freight cars, and that was it. I was solidly on my way to being an N-scaler. 40 years later, and it continues to be my scale of choice. Between finer details, sound becoming standard in even the smallest of engines, and the continued growing variety of high-quality rolling stock, N-scale has come such a long way from when I somewhat accidentally became an N-scaler.
Yeah, I tell you, Brian is absolutely right. N-scale has come a long way, and it's amazing what's available. I mean, I'm impressed by Z and impressed by N and all the other scales as well. The technology doesn't seem to have a limitation by scale anymore.
Yeah, and I think having that memory first and foremost, that of you got in it and you stuck with it, and it means more to you than just running trains. To me, that's great. And N-scale, I kind of passed over N-scale. I bought a bunch of stuff for it, and then I kind of just fell into the Z world. But there's some N-scale stuff that I have that I absolutely love, especially Kato stuff. My Rainbow era set that they made for Amtrak with a mix of the Penn Central and the Amtrak cars, and then they had the day one colored EMD E8 locomotive to go with it. That's one of my favorite sets, if not my favorite set that I have altogether in all my model railroad stuff.
All right, now let's head to Chris.
Hi, this is Chris Wells from Columbus, Ohio, and I'm a 3-rail O-gauger. And the reason I got into 3-rail O-gauge is as a kid, I started at HO scale, child of the 70s and 80s, did the Tyco trains, and then probably like most people, stopped doing trains, went off to college, started a family, and then when I was probably in my early 30s and had my 2 young daughters, decided we really needed a Christmas train underneath the tree. And I talked to my dad, and I got his old Lionel post-war sets. And I took the old tubular track out, started putting that around the train, fixed up some of his old post-war trains, started there, and the rest is history, as you might say, because today I've got a layout in my basement that's made up of both post-war, because I love the old stuff, but I've also got modern scale stuff, like the new scale steam engines that you get both from MTH and Lionel are absolutely gorgeous. Lucky enough to have some 072 curves so I can run a mix of both. And I love three-rail O-gauge because I get to run fantasy stuff. I get to run modern stuff, scale stuff, command control, a little bit of everything. And it's just lots of fun for me. I love the size, the heft, the sounds, the smoke, all the wonderful things in three-rail O-gauge. And that's what I enjoy. So thanks for letting me share how I got into the hobby and how I do a three-rail O-gauge.
Well, thank you, Chris. And sounds like you have a great combination there of some modern and nostalgia.
Man, Chris, I got to say, I like this one because I lived it and I got a lot to say here on this one. So for me, I was out of the hobby for a long time too, just with living in apartments. And then when we bought our first house after I got married and had kids, and I was like, it's time to put a train around the tree. I felt the same way. And I still had all my old HO stuff, not a lot of track, and everything was kind of old. So I ordered a Hornby Coca-Cola Christmas train for around the tree. And it kind of went crazy from there. So when my wife and I got married, one of the couples at our wedding actually got us a Cass Scenic Railroad coach, which is in West Virginia. If you ever get a chance, ride those trains. They're a lot of fun. They take you up to the third highest peak in the state. But they got us one of the coaches with a Just Married banner on it because we had ended up going down there and riding those trains on our honeymoon. And I wanted to recreate that train, the Shea locomotive and the 4-passenger cars. So we took a trip to our local hobby shop that I hadn't been to since I was little, Esther's Hobby Shop in Millville, Pennsylvania. They've been around almost 100 years, and they specialize in N scale. And that when I remember going in there in 2021, and it blew the hobby up for me. That night, I remember going home and going through YouTube, and that's how I found Steve's Trains. And I went back into it full force. So yeah, I think that's great, reviving the hobby and getting into new things. And I actually also bought my first Lionel this past Christmas. I got the Hogwarts Express for underneath the tree. So, hey, that's pretty awesome.
Very, very cool. Now let's head to Ian Farrell.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ian Farrell, and I'm from Mastic, New York. I've been in the hobby off and on for over 40 years, and I also have a YouTube channel, Mastic Shortline. I chose HO scale because that was what I had in the days of my youth. And without wanting to offend anyone, I found HO scale to be less cumbersome and more prototypical than O scale, and easier to service and less delicate than N scale in my big, clumsy hands. N scale also wasn't as widely available as it's become over the past few years. Thank you for listening to my answer. Love the podcast, Ray. Keep up the excellent work.
Well, thank you, Ian. And I think Ian does bring up a good point. You got to kind of know yourself and know your capabilities and your limitations.
Yeah, and I mean, growing up for me, I always thought HO was the perfect size. Like, what else could you want? You can do the 4x8. You can have the stuff, all that you need for a decent size layout. They are easy to work on, and Ian, like you said about your childhood and keeping it the same from when you first got into trains, I think that's great. Keeping the hobby alive from the time you were little till now.
Now it's time to hear from Joel Kelly.
Hi, everyone. This is Joel Kelly from Gary, Indiana. This past December, I chose to use ON30 for my new layout, the Calumet Valley Railway. As a kid, I had always had HO, but never had created a layout. When designing this new layout after moving to a new house, I tried first to model something freelance in HO standard gauge, but an idea that I could buy into never really came. Living in a rural Midwest farming community for most of my life, trains were just an everyday thing. However, the standard gauge diesels I couldn't relate to. Growing up, I spent almost every weekend going to a nearby operating narrow gauge steam museum with my family, and those trains were a lot of what I remembered loving about railroads growing up. I couldn't relate to those mainline Class 1 giants, but the quirky narrow gauge short lines were very familiar to me. So I took the leap and switched to ON30, modeling a freelance narrow gauge here in the Midwest. It has been well worth it and has led me to learn so much more about model railroading.
Well, Joel, that's a pretty interesting way of getting into a little bit different scale.
Yeah, Joel, like I mentioned before about ON30, I think it's great that you could do a lot more even in a small amount of space with having tighter curves and everything for bigger locomotives. As far as realism goes, I think those narrow gauge railways are pretty awesome. There's actually one that I've ridden, the East Broadtop Railroad. I rode probably over 20 years ago in central Pennsylvania that still operates today. And you can see those narrow gauge railroads still in full force. So, yeah, keep it up.
All right, and let's head out to Arkansas.
Hey, Ray. The scale that I chose to model took it.
Oh, that's right. He didn't say his name. And now let's head out to Arkansas and Joey Gento.
Hey, Ray. The scale that I chose to model took its own journey in itself. Growing up, Dad and I modeled HO scale. By the time I was in high school, my attraction was O-gauge high rail. O-gauge helped me kick off my model railroading journey in scratch building, track laying, wiring, and weathering. In 2014, I met my friend Darius in Nashville, Tennessee. I helped him build and operate his HO scale Reading, Wilmington, and Northern Branch layout. With some encouragement and inspiration, plus having limited space in my apartment, I switched back to HO scale. I only came close to N scale in 2022, but with the passing of Darius and his family entrusting me with his HO collection, I vowed to stay true to HO scale for the foreseeable future. Of course, O-gauge and Timplay will always have a special place in my heart and will, for now, remain the scale that goes under the Christmas tree.
Well, I know tonight's focus was on 1/220th scale, and we talked a bit about we talked about me modeling. We talked a bit about HO scale, but let's just for a second talk about those larger scales and the visual. The visual on them is so amazing when you start to get into O and G scale and in the bigger scales. It's wild to be able to see them in person, just the size and just how, I guess, tangible it is.
Yeah, and to echo Johnny Cash's words from the old Lionel commercials, little hands need big trains. Everybody loves the sight of a Lionel, and even G gauge. I do have one G gauge locomotive that my dad bought me, an Elk River Climax steam engine, and I don't even have any track for it. I have a friend with an outdoor garden layout that I've ran it on there one time. But yeah, to get to see it, it's neat seeing something like that run. And like I said, with O-gauge and Lionel, I mean, that's just, there's something patriotic almost about Lionel because it's such an American tradition to have it under the Christmas tree.
And our last answer comes to us from Maryland.
My name is Scott, and I'm from Rising Sun, Maryland. I model in N scale and have been doing such since about 1980. So in the early days of N scale, it wasn't always super reliable, and my dad was modeling in HO scale. I just wanted to try something a little bit different. So I started modeling in N scale when I was about 10 years old or so. Built a couple of small layouts on hollow core doors, and then eventually graduated to bigger and better things when I got my own house. Started in N scale with about a 3-foot by 10-foot layout in a townhouse, and now I have a bigger layout in our current house that's about 24 feet by 15 feet. So N scale, I think, provides a good ratio of scenery to trains. There aren't too many trains. There isn't too much scenery to do. There's kind of that good mix between the two. There's plenty of motive power and rolling stock and structures available for N scale now. It's really matured as a scale. So I think it's a good compromise for modeling. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Scott. And you've seen 46 years of change in N scale, and all kicked off with maybe just a little bit of rebellion against Dad to do something a little bit different. And certainly has led to probably a really has led to a 46-year love affair with N-Scale.
Yeah, Scott, that's a long time to be in that, but I get it. It's when we first moved into our new house, I originally had plans for a 4x14 N-Scale layout, just because there is so much you can do with that. I think it's great that you can still fit a lot into a small amount of space and with N as you can with Z. It's amazing to see N-Scale in the hollow core door layout becoming more and more popular as you see some of these big name model railroaders on YouTube, Steve Strange, DIY and Digital Railroad, using hollow core doors for a layout, because that's really all you need for what you can do within that amount of space in N-Scale. And there are a lot of options, like you said. I think with the especially DCC and sound, whether it's Kato, Broadway Limited, things like that, you do have the options and the structures and the scenery all for N-Scale that can make one heck of a layout.
Well, thank you, everybody who submitted their answer to the question of the month. You can look for next month's question of the month on our website, aroundthelayout.com/question. Scroll down, you'll see the instructions on how to record your answer. Send that in, and you might just hear yourself heard on Around the Layout podcast. Tim, want to thank you so much for coming by and giving us all an education on the 1/220th world Z scale. We'll share a whole bunch of these links on our website, aroundthelayout.com/216, including to your uszscale.com website, where folks can get themselves started in the world of Z scale.
Yeah, Ray, thanks for having me, and go check out USZ, everybody. The link to my YouTube channel is on there, so you can see some more. They're poor quality videos, but I try to get the knowledge out there. And if you are in Pittsburgh, PA, please stop by Esther's Hobby Shop. They've been around for almost 100 years, and that's my go-to for scenery and equipment and stuff and other scales. And we need to support those little hobby shops like that, because they're not going to be around forever. Together, I think we can all make AZL as big of a household name as Lionel is.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's episode, check out past shows, and much more on our website, aroundthelayout.com. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at aroundthelayout.com/crew. Follow us on social media, aroundthelayout.com/social. And send us your feedback, aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us around the layout.